Diana Mahabir Wyatt, finally. London to Port of Spain, at home around the world.
And we are.
What's the weather like? Always have to ask you.
It's rainy season. It's pouring rain. It's coming down in buckets full. And if you can't hear me, it's because the rain is hitting the roof, which is a lovely, comforting sound. It's now stopped. It'll do this for the next 20 minutes.
Is it hitting a corrugated iron roof?
It was up until you asked, and then it stopped.
Look, I need to get through the checklist. I know you hate listening to this, but we've just got to establish your credentials.
Go ahead.
Your career. It's not you. But it's your career checklist.
Okay.
You're professionally a human relations consultant,
an industrial relations consultant, and I am a human rights activist. I'm the president of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. I'm on the board of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Childline, etc., about 15 others.
Yeah, look, less of it I'm on the board. You actually founded, didn't you? You set up the Coalition Against Domestic Violence in Trinidad and Tobago.
I did. I also set up Childline. I also set up an organization called Stop Elderly Abuse Now. I also set up an organization called, it was to deal with children being abused in schools. That has now been stopped because the government said they were going to take it over, and of course they did and closed it all down.
And you were in government once, weren't you? You were
I was a senator. I was an independent senator for about 10 years, yeah. But then I had so many other things I needed to do that I had to stop.
Well, we met in Trinidad. You were coming off an inquiry and I was going on to another inquiry. And I think it was 10 years ago.
It must have been, at least that long ago. Yeah. I still have the... yes, it was. It was because I was dealing with the Commission of Inquiry into the coup, the attempted coup, which had taken place here in 1990. And the inquiry didn't get going until 1999, so it would have been about 2000.
Yeah.
My goodness, you have a good memory. I'd forgotten about the time lag.
Oh, to meet you, Diana, one does not forget.
Well.
So how's it been? How's COVID? Tell us, how has COVID-19 been in Trinidad and Tobago? You know that Trinidad has suddenly hit the consciousness here because it's become one of the areas where we cannot now travel to without having to undergo quarantine when we come back. But what's it been like for you?
You can't come anyway because the borders have been closed since March. What happened was when we closed the borders, we became a poster child for the WHO. We were top of the list of countries that had no cases of COVID. We had no local transmission. The only deaths we had brought in from outside, either people who had come on cruise ships or returning residents. And that went on for about 3 months. But during that time, being good old-fashioned colonial, sorry, I'm not supposed to say that, having followed the WHO advisories and listening to Boris Johnson and his buddies do their little panel discussion every day. And what we did is we followed the leader. We did what you did. So we closed down. We had essential industries. You were allowed to work if you were in something like food or health, that kind of thing. But that was it. Everybody else had to close down, which of course ruined the economy. But apart from that, the experience of it, well, I loved it. I just loved it. I love working from home. You work longer, you work harder, but you don't have to get into traffic. And I think, as you were saying a little bit earlier, we do learn more about technology. We learn to use Zoom as though we're using local telephone, Skype,
Yeah.
Zoom, GoToMeeting, all of those things. Mind you, we don't always do it all that well because there are always glitches. I can't tell you how many meetings I have a meeting about every other day or every day, either on Zoom or sometimes on something called GoToMeeting. And there's always a glitch. There's always that first 10 minutes because we weren't born as they are now. I swear to God, 2-year-olds can use Zoom. I know certainly my great-granddaughter, who is 5, 6, goes to school every day. She has her own computer and her own desk and her own little bookshelf, and she goes to classes on the computer, and she goes to visit her friends and gossips on the computer, and she just wishes she could go back to school. But it's great up until you start to think of those children who don't have internet access at home. Insofar as my experience has been, I've enjoyed the lockdown. We're not on lockdown now, we're back to work. But insofar as the Caribbean Center for Human Rights is concerned, we have had 2 particularly difficult problems. Interrupt me if you want at any point, okay?
No, go. I wanted to know. I mean, funnily enough, I was Singapore, another small, like the United Kingdom,
same size. Yeah.
Very recently, the Chief Justice was saying that he was urging the new graduates to do pro bono work because one of the effects of the pandemic was to deny access to justice to an increasing percentage of the population.
We do.
No?
Well, not entirely. I mean, we have more law graduates coming out of law school than we can employ. So the Caribbean Center for Human Rights has got a lot of young people now coming out. Some of them are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they're much better than I am. And they have offered to do work pro bono. So we have set up a committee of the young people. Now, we have 2 major problems at the moment, partly because of COVID, but not entirely. We have a refugee problem, like you have. They do the same thing. They come over on boats, sometimes inflatable boats, sometimes they drown. When they get...
And they're coming from Venezuela.
They're from Venezuela, yeah, but Venezuela's a total mess. They have no medical services anymore. It's very hard to get food, and we get both families, and now they're starting to send unaccompanied children over, just out of hope that somebody will help them. But they come over, and we have no refugee policy legally here, which I believe you have. We don't have. We've never passed one through Parliament. And what is happening, and as an organization, of course, we are pressing for this, but we haven't yet got one. And what happens is the police, therefore, when people come in and they just land on the coast somewhere and someone goes and picks them up, they're illegal. And now there are 2 sets that come in there. There are illegal immigrants, and then there are the trafficked ones. We get a lot of trafficked women and children. And that is an area that we have asked our pro bono youngsters to start looking into and start to help. These are under the guidance of Rajiv Prasad, who is a senior counsel, equivalent to QC in the UK. And we are now looking into ways in which we can deal with it, because although we have ratified the United Nations Convention on Refugees, we have not passed the legislation which you are supposed to do if you've ratified. And the process that we have been doing here is that people can be registered and they're given free pass for a year as registered immigrants. But if they don't get into the line in time to be registered, they still come in and they are illegal. And police go around and they do a rounds, as we call it, picking up people from liming spots and sometimes houses and deporting them. They just put them on a boat, send them back to Venezuela, where they will be punished because of what they have done in escaping, because they have not gone, they don't have visas. The government offices are closed. I don't think that our embassy in Caracas is open. Again, the pandemic has closed a lot of government offices. And it's a catch-22. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
The other problem that we are looking at is the ones that are caught here are put into an immigration detention center, which is like a rather large barn where men and women are incarcerated under conditions that you would not have kept your beloved dog in. It is the food, when you can get it, is substandard. There are no medical help. It's overcrowded. There's no such a thing as social distancing. And in our prisons, which is the other area which is overcrowded, we have had a couple of cases of the virus. And it is again overcrowded, limited in terms of medical help. They do have, but it's limited. There's just not enough resources to be able to deal with it. The Caribbean Center for Human Rights, we're doing our best. We're not funded. We have no funding at all. So everybody who works for the CCHR is working out of conviction, out of passion, and out of a genuine belief that people do not deserve to be treated the way they are being treated. And I am really, really pleased that young people are volunteering to help with this. There are a couple who are waiting on the results of their exams. There are some who got through last year. And we are just using everybody that we can to try to help, because it is a genuine human rights problem.
Oh, and what are you doing? Are you you're lobbying government? Are you making applications to court?
Oh, everything, all of the above and some more. There are a lot of very kind, very generous people in Trinidad. Trinidadians tend to be very warm-hearted and really want to help people. So there are church groups. There's a Christian group called Living Waters. There's a Hindu group which is doing a lot of work in country areas where the police don't normally go to help the illegal immigrants. Some of these are children. And there are other groups that have set up little non-registered schools so that the refugee children can go to school. This is outside of the law, because at the same time, of course, the regular schools, the government schools are closed anyway. And so no official schools are open. People are doing what they can, but what happens, as I'm sure happens in other countries, it is the poorest people that are helping the people who are worst off. And what you're hearing...
So when will the government schools reopen?
No, government schools are not reopened. So the usual thing happens is that mothers with small children have to stay home to look after their children. Otherwise, they can be reported for child neglect, which they are and can be charged. But because the tradition here is that when you cannot send your children to holiday camp or nursery school, that you send them to their grandmothers. Grandmothers are very useful. It's a cultural thing. My children always, when they had children, always said, but mommy, I mean, this is traditional. We have to send the children to stay with you. I wasn't always overly happy with that, much as I loved my grandchildren. They now have children and they're now doing the same thing. But the thing is that because of the high risk factor, especially with this new second wave, we never really had a first wave, but this new wave where we're getting 100 new cases a day, elderly people are being told that they should stay at home and keep a distance. And we are now getting daily warnings that children can be COVID carriers, although they don't show any, the usual thing, same thing that's happening all over the world. But it means that because here we also have a culture where you have mothers and children, and fathers don't always appear in the picture. It is the child mother that looks after the children. And if they can't work, they can't feed the children.
Have you had to go into court at all? Have you gone to before a tribunal?
Well,
in COVID,
I go to court on industrial relations issues, but in terms of the COVID problems or the refugee problems, because I'm not registered as a lawyer, I haven't been before the bar.
No.
That's what we have our volunteers, our young people for. And we do have lawyers who are on the CCHR as well. But they're doing it on video, eh? They're not going to courthouse. They're doing it on video.
And it's the Caribbean. So you are not just dealing with Trinidad. No. You're looking at the human rights impact of COVID across the Caribbean.
Yeah, we have people on our board from Grenada, from Jamaica, but the situation is just as bad everywhere. Jamaica is increasing in their COVID-19 numbers enormously. I just heard today that Usain Bolt, whose name will be familiar to you, he's got it.
Yeah.
He's just tested positive for COVID-19. And
yeah, I mean, a supreme athlete, someone who could not be in a better physical shape, not at his peak now, because of course he's retired, but he's still in amazing good health.
Compared to the rest of us, he's at his peak.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But so it just reinforces that anybody can get it at any time. The thing that is difficult here is, of course, our borders are still closed. So students who are in the UK who want to come back are having a hard time. You have to get permission from the Minister of National Security, and there is a lineup, 4,000 long, and they only allow in a limited number every day or every week. And with those coming in have come in the virus.
And just to put it in context, what's the population of Trinidad?
Oh, about the size of, we're not even as big as Manchester. We're about, I don't know, 1.6 or something like that.
Yeah. So 4,000 is a lot of people. 100 a day is a lot of people.
Yeah. And so people are really starting to be frightened. But because we just had elections on August the 10th, the period moving up to elections, there were all kinds of political rallies where there were no masks being worn, where they were all crammed together with social distancing being forgotten, all of the things that the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister had been saying on TV every day. But they completely forgot about it because they were, they were looking to win elections. And because they were win elections, they weren't going to stop all of their supporters from coming out. One of the interesting things, and I don't know if you have it in the UK, and I would like to know, is just before elections took place, the government issued a regulation saying that pandemic leave must be paid. Now, they had been paying for public servants all through the lockdown, even though they were all at home. But now, anybody who has to go on leave because they have the virus, because they are quarantined because someone in their family has the virus, because they are quarantined because someone in their office has the virus, so the whole office has to be shut down. Someone who cannot work because they can't send their children to school, because school teachers are not working because schools are closed down, providing they work for the government, providing they're part of the public service, they are to be paid full pay. Now, this was obviously just before elections because they were hoping to have the 4,000 government employees vote to put the existing government in. It worked. They're back in. And it's probably a good thing because at least they have some experience in dealing with COVID, because we really did very well for those first 3 months. But Marion, people have lost discipline. They've lost patience. They can't. You can't have people living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 children locked down for days and days and days. You just can't do it. And so the discipline has disappeared. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't have 3 children under 5 years old screaming and yelling and running around, a 2-bedroom apartment locked down. I would go crazy. And what we are finding is that the level of depression. I was talking to one of our members on the board of the CCHR, is a leading psychotherapist. And she says that, she's overworked because people keep coming because they are under so much stress and the levels of depression are enormous. They're exponential. And I can understand it.
Is there any good news? Is there any positives that have come out of COVID-19, do you feel?
Yes, of course. Number one, there's far less traffic, so there's far less pollution. We have all these youngsters now getting involved in environmental control as well as getting involved in CCHR. The enormously generous outpourings of help for refugees are making, I think, people, the humanism is coming up and it is glorious to watch. There are a lot of problems, but I think that even that the government has agreed to let out of the overcrowded prisons people who only have, are there on trivial offenses like DUIs or smoking marijuana or whatever. They are.
Yeah, we've done the same.
Yeah, and that I think is something that is positive. There always will be positives. We're all learning how to use, I think we are all learning how to use internet technology much better. We're almost up to the level of a 12-year-old, a lot of us now. And that is a positive thing because that's going to go on into the future. We fully expect more waves, more viruses in the future. And we have increased and improved the capacity, the bed capacity, and we have brought in more we brought in nurses and medical technicians from Cuba. They are very good, and so that we have more available and to look after people in quarantine. We still have a long way to go, eh? I don't think that the conditions in quarantine are.
Well, we're building up a huge backlog in the criminal courts, huge backlog. I think that's and in the family courts.
But we're not,
staggering.
you see, because we now have cameras in prisons. We now have cameras in different courthouses. Our backlog, we have people who have been on remand for 20 years. And
sorry, say that again?
We
people on remand for 20 years?
Yeah, people who have been on remand in prison, locked up for longer than their sentences would have been, simply because their cases are not being heard. We didn't have enough in terms of legal aid who are going to volunteer to deal with it. It's one of the pet subjects, pet passions of Ravi Prasad, who is the one who started the CCHR along with me and Desi Allam. And now that we're doing court cases online, the backlog is melting. And that is a good thing. And that, I hope, is going to continue when we are able to open the borders again.
Do you have jury trial in criminal cases?
Yeah. But
that's because I gather that the problem here has been actually managing socially, keeping the jury members socially distanced, and the logistics involved in setting that up have delayed the bringing of trials. And
that's true. We now are having one judge deal with the trial instead of having it go through a jury. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
There's a huge debate and resistance to that here.
Yes, and you can understand why, but I think that the chances, the danger of having something fraudulent happen or a judge being corrupt are far less than having somebody in remand year after year after year. How do you get back to your life after 20 years? You have nowhere to go. You have no work to get. There's no citizen grants for people like that. How are they going to manage without going back to prison, without breaking somebody's window, stealing something, so they will be put back in prison because that's the only place they're going to be able to survive.
Yes. Diana, if anyone wanted to support the work of the Caribbean Centre for Human Rights, I'm assuming you've got a web presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have it. It's Caribbean Centre for Human Rights. I never get onto the web, to be honest.
They'll find it. Uncle Google will send it to them. And if there's anyone out there who's got relevant expertise and would like to volunteer pro bono, that again is something that they could let you know through the website.
Yes, and I also think things like counseling for people who have been traumatized. And if we can get the connection to, because people in prison are amazing, eh? I mean, some of those lifers, they have a debating thing happen every year, and they beat the students from the university in debates on a regular basis, even the law school. Yes, they paint, they have an art group, and every year they have an exhibition which is in one of the malls. Brilliant stuff. They are a lot of people. The problem is, as brilliant as they may be, and they all do university courses, and they get they get certificates in this and degrees in that. One of the best, I think, is the one that is done for children. And the level of help and training they get is wonderful, so that when they get out, they can actually make something of their lives if people will let them. But there's always a lot of prejudice against ex-prisoners. But yes, counseling, we don't have enough counselors and social workers, so that if there is somebody that would like to help, we would appreciate it. And I would appreciate it if you could get the website connections so that people can.
I will make sure. I'll make sure that goes up with the talk. Well, look, let's just, as our last segment, let's just have a look forward. Just one permanent change that you think is going to come out of COVID-19 in Trinidad.
Well, two, if I may. One is working from home, less traffic on the roads, court cases being done virtually, not all of them, but a lot of the low-lying court cases being done virtually. One of the things which worries me a little bit, and I know I've run into this myself in the industrial court, is that lawyers are asking for postponements of cases on the grounds of the COVID epidemic, because a lot of lawyers don't know how to use Zoom, they don't know how to use the technology. And so cases are being put off and put off and put off. So I think that one of the things...
Yes, I'm convinced we're going to see a mandatory element in the training of lawyers involving the use of the virtual technology. And they're educating us over here now on paperless advocacy, paperless dealings. That's a permanent change, isn't it? It just works for society. It is time and cost efficient.
Marion, if I know you have a lot of time on your hands and nothing much to do, but if you could offer to come to Trinidad and do some training for the Law Association for lawyers on exactly what you're saying, how to use the technology, how to get into a paperless judicial system, I think you would be doing a boon for the world.
Diana, I think I know people who might do that. I'm going to reach out to one of the specialist bar associations and I'll ask them, because it's the Family Law Bar Association and they have been doing, they've educated all of us and they may know someone who can do it. Right. There we are.
I'm so glad you called.
Well, it's always a delight to speak to you. Is it the? I can see the sun behind you. The green looks beautiful. Is the sun back out?
What we are experiencing is what I call a sun shower. The sun is out and the rain is falling on the galvanized roof, and it sounds lovely.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful way to end this. And I'm just so glad you're there and that the centre is there and that the work continues. I was going to describe you at the beginning as being an advocate for the vulnerable. And that seems to me is exactly what you are. Keep doing it, Diana.
It's in the DNA. Don't blame me. I got it from my parents. Take care.